Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Has 20 Virtual Summit Breakouts. During this session, you'll be able to submit questions and upvote questions from other attendees. The questions with the most votes will most likely be among the questions asked by the host to the presenter at the end of the session during the live Q&A. The bottom right tile box is where you can type in your question as well as click the thumbs up button to upvote a question. During the session on the top right tile box, you will also see a 5-question quiz based on the speaker's content. Enhance your learning by taking the quiz during the session and get points for your correct answers. All sessions will be available on demand, and if the presenter has given us permission, you will also be able to download the slides. It is now my pleasure to introduce session 24, Bellagio Buffet Analytics, Necessary for COVID Recovery. It will be presented by John Wadsworth, Senior Vice President, Client Engagement, Health Catalyst. Enjoy the session.
Thanks, Stu, for that kind introduction. Well, folks, we are just about done with another successful Healthcare Analytics Summit. I absolutely love this conference. And before we dive in, I want to pause for a minute and thank you for all being the influencers that you are in the healthcare analytic community. I've picked a topic that's near and dear to me. For over 20 years, I've been working in this healthcare analytics space, and my sincere hope is to be able to pass along some of the learning that I've gleaned from working with so many of you. Thank you for teaching me. We are living in truly unprecedented times. No one has ever lived through a pandemic like COVID, where the world was so interrelated and connected. The effects are far-reaching and far from over. I want to begin by staring down some of the realities in which we're now operating. Let me share a handful of observations that I've made while working with dozens of health systems during and through COVID recovery strategies. The command centers that have popped up at health institutions have elevated the value of data and analytics to shine a light on operational transparency, and the timeliness of that information cannot be overstated. With revenues having been decimated in Q2 of this year and an uncertain outlook for Q3 and Q4, identifying and generating new streams of revenue holds immense value. There have been furloughs and layoffs and massive cuts to operating budgets, and analytics have been affected as well. Those seeming to fare the best with job security are those with a deep understanding of the business of care delivery, coupled with some degree of tech savvy. And honestly, any role that's not directly touching a patient has unfortunately become candidate for outsourcing. And I've seen some furloughed or laid off employees actually come back to those institutions that laid them off because they've begun recognizing the value of those individuals that can stitch together seams of operations and finance, or the effect of clinical outcomes and our operations, and the interplay with finance. And people with these skills are extraordinary assets within health systems because they can help make sense out of the surrounding chaos. All right, with that sobering preamble, let's lay out the next 30 minutes together. I am convinced that in spite of, and perhaps even in some measure because of the pressures of this pandemic, we will emerge better equipped to leverage data and analytic resources to improve care delivery worldwide. Our time together is going to be allocated into 3 chunks. First, we're going to talk about some basic business model assumptions that are baked into every health system that I've observed and consulted on. And then we'll address a couple pervasive pitfalls associated with those business models. And finally, we'll talk through some ways to navigate the pitfalls by sharing some lessons learned. This is my 7th year to present at Healthcare Analytics Summit. And the previous years, I've addressed a topic that predominantly has revolved around the healthcare analyst, or the data scientist, or the analytic expert. These are the producers of your analytics for an organization. Now, in those previous sessions, we learned a lot about the skills that are needed to be effective in such technical roles. We explored how to grow those skills for the individual producer with lots of recommendations for team managers to foster that learning. And we've gone deep into the domains of healthcare delivery to be understood at an individual level for the analyst or scientist, so They can become an effective partner with the business that's charged with efficient and quality care delivery. Now today, we're going to take that topic and turn it on its head. We're really going to take a look at a system view of a much broader set of competencies that are needed to support a health system or a payer, an ACO, an IDN, or all of that in a broad sense of healthcare analytics. Now, this is a macro view of what an analytic team would need to know, to do, and to become in order for a health system to fully leverage the assets of both data and analysts. Now I'm going to use the term analyst today in a broad sense. It's going to cover all the roles inclusive of data engineer, data scientist, et cetera. There is a spectrum of analytic utility that a health system will inevitably come to value. And the first objective is to understand the segmentations of that analytic spectrum. Our second objective is going to be using that spectrum to help us better appreciate the system-level competencies that must be present if health organizations are to elevate both analytic production as well as consumption. The third objective is to prescribe tactics that can immediately help you improve data literacy rates within your health systems that you lead and support today. Now, some of you may be scratching your heads and wondering, why would John attempt to build a presentation around something as taboo as a buffet, given our current situation? Now, I chose this analogy for 3 reasons. First, it's simple, super simple. Simple analogies are the most effective for teaching. Second, I love food. So this one really works for me. I think most people appreciate food, so it's relatable. And third, I believe in my heart we will overcome this pandemic and emerge stronger, smarter, and more compassionate. We're going to have buffets again, so this is a hopeful message of what's to come, hopefully in the near future. Now, I know you're all sitting remote, you're watching this telecast. I need you to engage, even at the end of this conference, a little differently, okay? Do me a favor. Turn on your imagination and close your eyes. I'm serious. Close your eyes at home. With them closed, just do it. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine you've just walked through the entrance of the most amazing restaurant. This is a place that you've heard about from friends, you've read the reviews, you've scrutinized social media content to learn what items are the favorites, the must-haves, the things you absolutely have to try while you're there. And now, you're finally here. And you're about to experience for yourself what you've only heard about and imagined. Keep them closed, okay? The myriad smells entice you to step deeper into the restaurant and learn what food could possibly have such an inviting aroma. And you chuckle and you think to yourself, etiquette be darned, because as you make your way to your table to be seated, you can't help but stare at the food on the plates of guests that are already seated and served. Your mouth salivates, your brain goes into overdrive, processing all of the information and anticipating the reward about to come. Okay, open your eyes. I've just described my experience at the world-class Bellagio Buffet in Las Vegas. I'd heard about it from coworkers, I'd read the reviews, and I was genuinely excited to try this for myself. And I must confess, the experience did not disappoint. Now, as I've contemplated that experience over and over, I became intrigued with the business behind the buffet. What does it take to pull that off? What are the challenges to be addressed? What is the value proposition? Let's explore just 3 of the many challenging parameters the Bellagio Buffet must navigate in order to succeed as a truly world-class eating establishment. First, they have to understand and anticipate the varied needs of their clientele. They have to have something that appeals to the high rollers who demand to be pampered, or the shoppers who just want to kick up their feet and sample everything, or the bachelorette party goers who want to binge and get back to the Vegas nightlife, the sister's getaway, the family with parents and children. All of these audiences have very different tastes, needs, and expectations for their eating experience. Second, the Bellagio needs to appeal to so many different tastes and cultures, from Asian cuisine to Italian, American, Filipino, Latin flair. And as good as the food is not the whole experience. The ambiance is astounding. You've got crystal chandeliers and goblets and high-end wine menu with segmented seating for the high rollers. There are booths for the families and sparkling water or chilled sodas for the kids. You have romantic nooks, private tables, large seating arrangements, all to enhance the offering. And third, with all those logistical and value creation challenges, we can't omit the economic imperative that the whole dining experience needs to be profitable. The value of the experience is perceived and derived by the individual customer, but from a business standpoint, it has to be anticipated and prepared for collectively. So let's run through some assumptions that are a part of that business, the buffet business model. There's a belief that people can find their way easily to the buffet. And once there, patrons can make their way through the service line, and in so doing, they're going to recognize food that they want, perhaps identify items they didn't even know that they might want. The business model also assumes that customers can hold a plate. They can carry their choices. When they finally get seated, they can use the provided utensils to get all that goodness in them. The model presumes people will be able to eat without choking, and ultimately, the model assumes that the whole experience will be valued enough for that customer to return and warrants a positive review. Leading analytic efforts for a health system holds a lot in common with these Bellagio Buffet challenges of that business model. You must understand the varied needs of your customer base, from your high roller execs to your frazzled frontline providers. An effective analytic strategy addresses the needs of the masses rather than a powerful few individual leaders. And the real value of such an offering is manifest in the way that the analytics help to generate revenue, decrease cost, and improve clinical outcomes. So what assumptions have you built into your data to the masses strategies, let's call it? Are they documented? Are they addressed? Let me highlight some very basic, but all too often overlooked assumptions that undermine the value of a centralized analytic offering. Do people in your health system know how to get to the producers of analytics? And once they find them, can they navigate the intake process without significant hand-holding? As non-techies work their way through your myriad analytic offerings, are they able to find the data that they're seeking? And when the data is served up and it lands on their plate, do they know what to do with it? Can they interpret what seems so obvious to an analyst and actually take action? And is that whole interaction between broad analytic consumer base so positive with your team that they'll likely want to return and post a glowing review? Okay, I know from painful experience, most of you, if not all of you, are chuckling and cringing as you listen to me describe these 6 assumptions. And I would imagine that that cringe and chuckle is a result of your own painful experience. Why is this so hard? It seems so easy to understand right there on the screen, and yet these are persistent risks in every health system. Now, there's a key learning that we can borrow from the Bellagio experience. The Bellagio team knows that these assumptions are not to be taken for granted. And in fact, they put diligent effort into mitigating those risks associated with each one. But rather than focusing on the individual risk and the accompanying strategy, they've actually found a North Star that guides all underlying strategies around those risks. And that star is value. The end goal for every customer is to walk out of that buffet having achieved extraordinary value. The whole dining experience, the food, the lighting, the seating, the customer interactions, the conversation, the music, even the send-off. It's all designed to create value. The Bellagio has nailed the value equation for the masses. So let's explore deeply that concept of analytic value for a health system. Not all analytics are created equal, nor do all analytics hold the same value, especially at a system level. Now, on this graphic, there are two axes. The y-axis shows increasing value to the overall health system. Now, think in business terms. As we climb this axis, the analytics and insights are helping the health system improve that patient and health system value exchange. Along the x-axis, we're showing the need to more and more deeply understand the business of care delivery offerings from inpatient to ambulatory, from pediatrics to skilled nursing facilities. The better that your analytic producers understand your business of care delivery, the better equipped they are to provide meaningful and thus valued insights. Benchmarking analytics are truly the least valuable offering that your central analytic teams can serve up to the masses. Now, they're great for marketing campaigns. They're also highly valued by data illiterate board members who put stock into such things as US News and World Report top hospitals. But they don't offer much in the way of how to change workflow. And the timeliness of this data is woefully lagging. Regulatory reporting is a step up from benchmarking because the measurement is largely based on decades-old evidence-based medicine. These are designed to track clinical processes that are known to directly influence clinical outcomes. And in this way, we do get some visibility into what needs to change in the course of that care delivery. Now, a big step up in this opportunity value continuum is what I would call risk-based stratification. And this offering requires a rather high degree of understanding the business drivers behind the request for information. Let me illustrate. Your accountable care organizational leadership will need to understand the aggregate clinical risk of the lives that they provide care for and thus negotiate a per member per month rate accordingly with payers. Your CIN leadership will need to understand the consistency or inconsistency of the care delivery among their employed and affiliate providers, along with the associated clinical outcomes. And your health system operational senior leadership team must understand the varied needs of the communities that they serve and ensure that those care offerings are both available and affordable for the masses. The highest form of value on this continuum would be to have all of the benefits of the risk-based stratification coupled with full transparency into the actual cost of care delivery. Imagine that costing information easily accessible and understood not only by care providers, but patients, so as to make truly data-informed care decisions with the patient and within the financial realities of payers and providers. So the last comment I'm going to make on this graphic is to just call out, look, this is a simplification of a very complex set of processes. I know that, along with the organizational structures and the financial models. But the principles outlined here are simple and true. Categorically speaking, the value equation shift from the bottom left to the top right can be a North Star for health systems that are investing in analytics. Now, having been in this field for over 20 years, there are two major mistakes that thwart the value equation of analytic offerings to health systems and to the masses. The first mistake is there is a frequent disconnect between analytic teams and healthcare leadership when it comes to using data to identify and then capture an opportunity for improvement within a health system. And the overwhelming tendency there is to woefully underestimate the resourcing required to actually capitalize on an opportunity that's found. The second mistake is also a resultant disconnect between the same parties, your analytic teams and your healthcare executive leadership. The tendency here is to overestimate the broad capabilities of analytic consumers throughout the health system to interpret and act on the analytic insights that are provided them. So there's some encouraging news here. These are mistakes that can be overcome. They really are. Health systems around the world are becoming more attuned to the need to develop system-level competencies and are implementing strategies to improve both the production of higher value analytics as well as the consumption and actionability of such outputs. So this is being done by improving the analytic menu that's being produced today, changing the analytic diet of your varied consumers, and ultimately teaching your consumers to be smarter about what they choose to consume to guide their workflow decisions at every level of the organization. So let's double click into each of those recommendations. Chefs produce far more value to the business than burger flippers. I know I'm just beating this metaphor, but a master chef understands what her customers truly value. And someone flipping burgers is just doing a job. Too many health systems have hired dozens and dozens, and in some instances, hundreds of report writers that are spending their days hunting down benchmarking data or regulatory requirements in EMRs and claim systems and other sources. And honestly, those efforts are not going to meaningfully help your health systems transform to deliver improved outcomes at lower costs. And that sounds harsh, but it's true. And it's much kinder than pretending that there is actual job security in writing reports for benchmarking purposes or even in regulatory reporting. If there are leaders of analytic teams and or executives listening today, please know minimizing the resourcing allocated to benchmarking will free up technical resources to begin working on much higher value analytic offerings. Now, you can't get rid of benchmarking. There's just no way you could do that entirely. Your boards won't stand for it, but you can minimize it. And you can do the same for your regulatory reporting needs. In fact, my recommendation is you should seriously consider outsourcing that regulatory burden. Why? There are companies who do this faster, better, cheaper than most of your teams today. It has to be done, but you can outsource that. Now, doing so, if you minimize that commitment to benchmarking and regulatory reporting, you will have more capacity to invest in an improved analytic menu, far more valuable to the health system, to the mass consumers of your offerings. And this is where you begin to change that analytic diet for the health system. So what do you do with that increased availability of analytic resources? You invest in them. You invest them to grow the ability to better understand your business, your ACO, your CIN, your 5-year growth strategy as a health system. Ensure that these technical experts are able to build reusable analytic content that can be leveraged over and over and over, such as a normalized aggregate view of finance, of operations, of clinical patient registries that can now be leveraged by your ACO, by your CIN, and even your executive leadership. A one-stop shop for all. There are plenty of downsides to this COVID-19 pandemic, but there are some bright spots as well. And I want to highlight one silver lining that every health system is staring down. That is their prioritization process of having to say no to lots of things that they've just funded in years past. Now that might sound like a negative, but it's not. The value I'm describing is the improved prioritization process that's developing as a system-level competency. And analytics as a function benefit greatly from this improved prioritization process. Why? No longer can the loudest voices of a few just force their way onto that central analytic team and get their data, get their way, get their information. Senior leadership has to consider the opportunity cost and the needs of broader organization needs and make those trade-offs. And more executive leaders are becoming aware of and addressing the conflation of, I don't have any data, with the data that you've given me is wrong. Those are not the same. So getting data to the masses is a really good first step toward moving up that value continuum. Next, senior leaders are recognizing that teaching people to interpret and act on analytic insights are very different skills than actually producing the insights. You need both. Now, remember the assumptions baked into the business model of healthcare analytics? Well, senior executives are recognizing that those are major risks to their ability to execute effectively on the 5-year strategy set at the most senior level. So they're investing in partnerships to come in and work with their central analytic teams and manage and mitigate each of the risks along those assumptions and help them as an organization readily move up that opportunity value continuum. Analytic competencies, which are above benchmarking and regulatory, are becoming a key aspect of every 5-year strategic plan around the world. And the effects of COVID-19 have influenced that collective mindset shift in senior healthcare leaders. In closing, let me share with you snippets of a recent conversation with some senior executives from a very large integrated delivery network. The plan, as it was shared with me, is for them to increase revenues 3 to 4 times their current size. This is a big IDN within 3 to 5 years. That is massive change. And that will largely be achieved through acquisition. Such an approach is supported by their entire administrative team, and IT and analytic implications will result in an extremely heterogeneous infrastructure, which will not, I repeat, not be implementing a rip and replace strategy of EMRs and billing and collections, et cetera. Rather, those native systems will remain, the data will be extracted, aggregated, and then normalized across the acquiring health system on a massive analytic platform. Now, the intent of that platform will be to simultaneously be able to support their ACO, their CIN, their care processes, care delivery, their service lines, their billing, revenue, and collection, and additionally drive massive innovation in the healthcare delivery space. The CIO and CAO leading this transformation are steadily marching their organization along this opportunity value continuum, and they're making tough decisions to minimize the investment in low-level analytics like benchmarking and regulatory reporting. Why? In order to support the broader business drivers of value for their health system. And I suspect such strategies will become the norm for many of you in the health systems that you support as well. I'm borrowing an idea from both Jim Collins and Brené Brown, two of my favorites. It is unkind to be unclear. And I will not mince words with you today. I would recommend as an action item that you go home and determine how much of your current organization's resources are actually going towards benchmarking efforts. That'll include the salaries of those collecting the data, normalizing, aggregating, submitting it, the cost of your third-party vendor that's producing the benchmarks, et cetera, all of it. Determine how much of your total analytic budget, I'm not talking EMR budget for licensing maintenance, that's a whole different ball of wax, okay? It's the analytics. How much of that is going towards benchmarking? And then understanding your entire analytic budget, set a goal to cut the benchmarking spend to less than 2% of your total analytic budget. Anything more is unsound. It is not a tenable long-term strategy. And in this way, you can keep your boards happy. They're going to have some benchmarking data. You can also free up resources to invest in far more value-add analytics. Another learning recommendation. You got to bite the bullet and just outsource your regulatory reporting burden. Healthcare analytic teams are mired down in this work. And most often, these are onerous, painful, inefficient, homegrown processes that do not scale, and they cannot keep pace with the increasing imposition of CMS and other mandates. Yes, you do need that function done in your system, but those would be good dollars spent by outsourcing to a partner that does it at scale. And if your health system is considering acquisitions as part of their near-term strategy, then this recommendation to outsource becomes even more important. Invest heavily in your analytic experts who are, I would characterize them as nerds with personalities. Let me explain that, okay? That is, they can talk to real people, doctors, nurses, service line leaders, business unit leaders, executives. The personality part of that nerd equation implies these are individuals capable of not only understanding the technical data models and the relationships of the data, but they also grasp the business drivers of care delivery strategies and partner with those stewards to measure and manage the efficacy of those business models. You need to stop fooling yourself to believe that your analytic team can and should be responsible to improve data literacy for the masses. They are fundamentally different skills. What you need as a health system partner are tech-savvy educators and change management experts that can lead out in this work. So hire it out. The initial outlay is going to feel expensive, but the total cost of ownership, I promise you, is far lower than going it alone and much more effective in the long run. Likewise, you need an expert partner for your health system to develop data-driven strategies for your CIO, for the CIN, for Pop Health, and your executive teams. The data are too complex today to go it alone. And such a partner should understand how to interrelate this and how to teach to integrate the strategies across your ACO and CIN and payer and administrative teams, not just support them in siloed, separated initiatives. This really is an exciting time to be part of the healthcare analytic industry. The pressures are acute in this pandemic, but they're forcing innovation at an unprecedented rate. And I'm grateful to learn with you and alongside you, as I'm truly optimistic that we will emerge from this better than we were before. Thank you for participating today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you.